AC, we are a week away pretty much from scary season, but that's not going to stop us from talking about a horror film, a Hammer horror film, because this is, after all, Son of Hammerland for
Yep.
September. And we are talking about Terence Fisher's 1968 revelation, The Devil Rides Out. Now, how many Hammer film posters are of some monster holding a woman in a nightie, like
It works,
unconscious,
right?
whether or not it actually happens in the movie?
Don't mess with what ain't broke.
I swear, I think it's just the same image, the same piece of artwork. They just changed the look of the
Yep.
monster.
Yep. What monster and who's he holding today? He's got a redhead, he's got a blonde. Yeah.
Wow. But this is a movie I wasn't quite ready for because have we talked about a film in this whole series these last couple of years in which Christopher Lee plays a hero?
The closest thing I think is the Gorgon,
That's right.
where he's kind of like a scruffy professor. I mean, he's elegant Christopher Lee in this one. And yes, but he's a hero. He's a man of action.
He's a man of action, but he's also a man of the dark arts. I was thinking if the MCU had been around 1968, this is our Doctor Strange, complete with he's only missing the white streaks in that hair, but otherwise
Right.
it's no perfect.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think Christopher Lee, this is one of his personal favorites, is that he liked the opportunity to play a heroic character. Also, he was a huge Dennis Wheatley fan, and he was key to getting this film on the Hammer roster. And along with Terence Fisher, we had a dream team here. We had our usual, Bernard Robinson doing the sets, and James Needs as the editor. But we also had Roy Asher was the cinematographer. We also had a screenplay by none other than Richard Matheson, who, wow, I mean, I just, that guy can do no wrong. He did so many of the great Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. He did amazing Twilight Zone episodes. He did the script for The Incredible Shrinking Man. So when I saw his name pop up the first time, I was like, oh, we're in for a treat. And he really does stay, according to Christopher Lee. I watched with the commentary last night with Christopher Lee. And he said that,
Is there a seance? Sorry.
Well, I'm assuming, just assumption maybe, that he recorded it before he passed through the veil. But yeah, he said that Matheson and Fisher stayed relatively close to Wheatley's novel. So there's only a few exceptions that he took exception to.
Well, and I have not read the novel, and I'm a Matheson fan as well, and so to see this, it's such an exceptional movie in a lot of ways because it's very surprising, and even the effects, which we'll get to towards the end of the movie / conversation, that you can look at it from one angle and say, wow, this is really kind of corny looking in the moment. And if you think about what this could look like today, if they were to remake this,
Sure.
it inspires a lot of kind of awe and horror. But set this movie up. What is The Devil Rides Out, sir?
Well, you've got the Duke de Richelieu, which is played by Christopher Lee, and he is a moneyed aristocrat, but he's an open-minded sort. And he and his two school chums, I forget what their relation is, but I think they were college buddies. But they're getting together for a little reunion, and Rex is the American, and Simon, I believe, is the friend that they're going to visit, who is he's at a gathering hosted by Mocata. And
AKA Ernst Blofeld.
Yep. Good old Mr. Price. So anyway, yes, so they're getting together, and Simon tells his friends that they're going to have to leave this gathering because, well, we'll get to that in a second. And he asks them to leave, and the Duke de Richelieu is suspicious. He goes upstairs. He discovers that, oh my gosh, they are planning a ritual, a satanic ritual. Oh my gosh, they're Satanists. And so he, punches out his buddy and drags him home. And the rest of the movie is basically Mocata trying to get his 13 followers together again in the same room so he can perform this satanic ritual and talk to the devil himself.
Very well done. Now, I think if I got this correctly, and I watched, as usual, the movie in two parts, the coming together of these three people, I know that Richelieu and Rex are friends. I believe the deal is Simon is the son of one of their former friends, and they were coming to check up on him because no one had seen him in some time. He'd kind of like fallen off the map. And it turns out it's because he fell in with this cult, essentially. And, you know, we do see demons and the devil himself. We just saw him on the cover of that Blu-ray there. But there's a whole wide cast of characters that show up here. There are friends of Richelieu who end up, you know, kind of running the safe house for the people that Richelieu and Rex rescue from this cult. There's a couple of them.
Rescue, aka kidnap.
I'll just go with rescue because I mean, like, yeah, sure, they're adults; they can do whatever.
Well, no,
I'm just,
I mean, like they don't go willingly. I guess is my point. Like,
yes,
he does have to forcibly drag them away from the cult. They're all in until he says, "No, you're not."
Right. And let me just, I'm going to jump around here because the rescue scene is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Now, before that, when they go to this party, they realize something's amiss when Richelieu, they go into this giant room and there's a big circle on the floor, beautiful marble painting, or I guess, I don't know if it's painted marble or just put together in tiles of essentially the devil, like a giant satanic ram's head. And then in the closet, there is a wicker basket, which Christopher Lee discovers because he is the Wicker Man.
That's right.
He opens it up and there's chickens in there. There's like a white hen, a black rooster or something. And according to lore, that's what you need in order to summon something. I believe they get kicked out and then they sneak back in later. And that's when they conjure up something in that circle. It's not the devil. I guess it's a demon. We don't know that at this point. It's a really creepy image of this black guy naked except for a blazing red diaper. That's the only, I don't know if there's a name for what this is, but it's just like crossed fabric that's covering his groin, and he's just standing there smiling, not really looking at them, but he's got these like red cat eyes almost.
Yeah.
And they vanquish him by throwing a crucifix into the middle of the circle, which plays into the rescue attempt when they go to get Simon. And what is the name of the Tanith is the name of the young lady that Simon is with in the cult. They go to rescue them from a backup ritual, and they drive a car right into the middle of people after the devil has been conjured. And they throw, is it another cross? I don't think it was holy water or something. I think they just threw a cross, right?
Yeah.
At the devil,
it's
and he makes him
hanging from the
disappear.
chain. Yep.
It's just, it's really lo-fi, but the way that it's shot and the audacity of, they just threw a cross at the devil and he disappears in this giant mass of smoke, like bam. It was, I almost stood up and cheered.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, and I know we'll talk about the effects eventually, but you know, like, I think if you buy into the movie, you know, there are these moments of heroism and genuine thrills. There's a Tanith, you know, under the spell of Mocata, like escapes, and she's driving away in a motor car, and it's like the closest thing Hammer's ever come to like doing a car chase. And you have them racing after each other, and you know, Rex's windshield shatters and he has to punch a hole in it so he can still see through, and then he's fighting the wind. And you know, like, I just, there's some really genuinely solid action moments throughout.
There is. And even that car crash, because I don't know if it's because we've seen a billion scenes like this in the 40 years or whatever since, but we know that he's going to crash because even he's peeking through that hole in the windshield and he drives to this patch of fog. Like, okay, he's going to hit a tree, but it's still very exciting. what I thought
Yeah.
was kind of strange is that he hits a pretty small tree and he gets knocked out, but then when we cut to it later, it looks like the entire car has been shredded as if it's been through a compactor, except for him. He just kind of stumbles out like, what happened?
Yeah.
But it is a great effect. It's preceded almost by a moment of comedy because he's
Mm.
driving Tanith out to this safe house with this family that they trust, and he gets out of the car to go talk to I think Richard is the guy who's the head of that family, and he's like, "Look, I got it. I need your help here." But he leaves Tanith in the car, and then he looks, and she's just driven it away, just right up the
Yep.
hill. He's like, "Oh shit! Now I gotta go after her." It's the movie made, and I don't know, I haven't read the novel, but this would have been a great franchise, like a Sherlock and Watson of the occult with Christopher Lee and the guy who played Rex. I don't happen, what was that actor's name?
I don't remember his name either, and I'm trying not to flip around this time.
Okay, wait, hold on up. But yeah, it's actually Christopher Lee and Leon Green playing Rex Van Ryn. Try saying that 5 times. Yeah, they're a great duo, a dynamic duo even. And we can't, I mean, a great hero pairing is only as good as the villain, as they say. And
Mhm.
I think Charles Gray as Mocata, there is a scene where he goes to the safe house and talks to Marie, who is the wife of Richard. It's their place, and they've got a little daughter named Peggy, who's probably about, 9 years old. But Mocata goes to visit when no one else is around, and well, there are people around, but they're all kind of upstairs being watched. This is after the kidnapping, as you called it, where Tanith and Simon have been safely secured in upstairs bedroom. There's people to watch over them to make sure nothing nefarious or occultish happens. Meanwhile, downstairs, Mocata enters and has this very polite, very subtle conversation with Marie, during which he hypnotizes her
Mhm.
and gets her to reveal where everybody is. And then he looks up into the ceiling and hypnotizes the people that are upstairs.
Yep.
It's what was the name? I'm blanking on him, but the actor from Salem's Lot who played Mr. Straker. He was the older
Is
gentleman.
that
Oh,
James Mason?
James Mason.
Yeah.
There's something about Charles Gray's performance in here that reminded me of James Mason, not in terms of the accent, but just the presence he has. He's been doing this a long time. He's super confident and he's super like oddly charming / threatening
Yeah.
that I was kind of falling under a spell myself.
Well, what I find so fascinating is that Charles Gray is kind of he's a little elevated, is a little almost camp, and I know that part of that is from seeing him in Rocky Horror Picture Show. But there's kind of an elevated, not quite fey quality to him, but the fact that he has so much power and charisma in this villainous role. And as you say, he's a smiling villain. He's a charming villain. He doesn't twirl his mustache at all. There's a great line after the scene you're referring to where he says, "I won't be back, but something will." And it's done in such a great kind of throwaway fashion that it lends it more menace than if you were to be like, "But something will." It's like, oh dear. Like he has so much confidence in how this is going to go, and it's going to go his way. And it actually, things really do go his way for the most part. It's a really great kind of like chess game between him and Dirichleau.
Right, and not even a chess game that's played out between them in person. There's a lot of, it's almost like
Right.
Wrath of Khan. There's a lot of
Exactly right. Yep.
parallel peril, as it were. There is, I guess we can jump ahead here to what is the climax and maybe go back and revisit some moments in between.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
there is another circle it's like a circle of protection that Dirichleau has drawn in the house of the Eatons, and he's there with all of the people that he's trying to protect
Right.
because he knows Mocata is going to be coming after them in a big way. And the deal, of course, as we've seen in 100 other movies, there's the big circle just drawn with sigils, and you can't go outside of it, otherwise you're in otherworldly danger. And there's a giant tarantula that shows up,
Yep.
kind of, and the effect is wonderful because this thing kind of comes out of the shadows and it gets up on its sort of rears, and you can almost see it trying to get inside the circle, but it's as if there's a transparent dome.
Yeah.
There's no like touching glass effect, but it's just the way that the legs move. You get the feeling, yeah, he's touching, he can't come inside.
Yeah. No, it's great.
The daughter shows up, and it turns out she's an illusion too, but there's a bit of trickery there, because when she comes into the room, you're like, oh no, she's in danger of being attacked by this giant tarantula,
yeah.
and mom and dad are being held back. Now, I'm a parent, and Christopher Lee is awesome, but the degree to which he holds them back would not be enough to hold me back if my daughter is about to be attacked by a giant spider.
Agreed.
But the young actress gives this like a very quick little smile to almost indicate to the audience that I'm not who you think I am.
Well,
and then, of course,
I go ahead. Sorry, didn't interrupt.
I was going to say, of course, she turns out to be an illusion as well. And there's so much great disappearing action that is more exciting than $100 million of special effects could ever be.
Well, and I think, during the commentary, Christopher Lee actually comments and he says, I would love to see this scene done with today's CGI and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh no, I just feel like it would become so much about the effects. And I can almost picture the awful swirling CGI, nightmare that they would try and conjure, but it's a movie about ideas, and it's very similar to Quatermass in the Pit in that way, that it's about the concepts. Like, these four people are using the means at their disposal to fight off the darkest of the Dark Lords. I mean, they have a confrontation with the Angel of Death. And yes, the Angel of Death in this case is a guy with a skull mask, and his horse has, these giant cloth wings on it. And yes, it could be thought of as a little hokey, but I really thought that, like, the editing and the way it's shot, it works. There's enough quick cuts, and where I'm like, okay, I see that horse has wings, but I'm not like going, oh my gosh, they've got them attached with, strings or whatever. Like, I feel like they pull off the effect, and it is meant to be an effect. There's a theatricalism to it. And I really appreciated that.
Well, I think what you said about the editing is spot on, because at one point Simon is trying to break out of the circle, and de knocks him out to keep him, inside. And during his being passed out is when the Angel of Death shows up on the horse, and that's what Simon sees when he comes to, this giant thing bearing down on him. And the way that it's shot, from the upper angle looking down at him, and from the worm's eye view looking up at the horse's hooves, you really do, it puts you into that moment as if you are being trampled and assaulted by this horse. The horse is bearing down, on us, the viewer.
Yep.
And we are looking down at Simon. So it is this perfect omniscient and subjective point of view that creates a moment of genuine dread, because we don't know if he is, because we get the feeling he's very close to the edge of this circle. So we don't know if he's going to fall outside of it and end up getting trampled. We don't know if the horse, because it's the Angel of Death, could actually penetrate the circle somehow. We don't know exactly the rules here. So we're not instantly thinking, oh, he's going to be okay.
And what I really like about this film is that we're dealing with magic, but the magic is dealt with from a very, like, grounded standpoint. It's not fanciful, like when Richelieu goes off to the British Museum to get, like the books that no one else gets to touch, but I have friends there. So also you get the sense that the Richelieu is like, there's that great, like, Rex asks if he can borrow the car, and Richelieu's like, yeah, take any of them, implying that I have a few, don't worry. You wrecked my car, not a problem.
Or Rex's car.
But yeah, so I mean, like, each one of these, the scene we've been talking about where they are in that circle of protection, that's definitely like a centerpiece of the film. But we have several of those. I mean, there's the one where there's the ceremony that does invoke the devil. I mean, that's that's a wild, I think it's intended to be more of an orgy than we are able to see. And I think it is more of that in the book, but we still get the idea that, like there's some wild cavorting going on, and it's meant to be a blasphemy against the God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost. So I really like how it feels. It feels very grounded in the same way that the Wicker Man does. The Wicker Man feels like yes, this is some pagan ritual, but they're deadly serious about it. And it isn't just like, and here's this magic spell. It's like, no, this magic spell trumps this magic spell, trumps this magic spell. And there are rules. And it feels like, again, I give all credit to Wheatley and Matheson for giving us the film that handles such a kind of could be easily frivolous subject, but gives it some gravitas.
Right. And going back to what you're talking about as far as rules, not only in terms of the magic, but in terms of this cult and this society and these rituals, I get the feeling that there is a structure and a logic and a tradition that they're following, because you've got some people in white robes.
Mhm.
You've got sort of this handful of, I guess, high priests in blue or purple robes, and then Mocata is in blue. They're not just all hanging out in black robes and stuff. They've got these tents set up. I mean, it's a very elaborate thing. And when the devil shows up, he's just sitting on a rock.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say anything. Again, you make this movie today, he's going to show up in a giant blaze of fire, and he's going to have like 16 heads and, be bellowing out stuff and very showy. It's creepy, much in the way that the demon we mentioned earlier is creepy, because he just kind of stands there and watches over the people that have brought him to the fore. And then of course he's vanquished pretty quickly, but you never get the feeling that he's he doesn't have a chance to unleash anything. He's pretty much working through his human minions to do all of his dirty work.
And I feel like that's a great opportunity to talk about the difference between terror and horror. I mean, I feel like we're actually faced with real horror here, because for me, horror is standing in awe of something that truly should not be. It's not that you're worried for your personal safety. You're not worried that something is going to kill you. You're not worried for your mortality. You're just like standing and realizing that I'm dealing with something that I've never experienced before, and that shouldn't exist. And here it is in front of me. And I feel like that's the thing. Like we have we have the assistant who rises and stands in the observatory, and we have the devil who just appears, and it's like the devil is right there in front of you. It's like, it's not like, oh, and the devil reaches out and like bites your head off. It's like, no, we're dealing with the dark prince himself right here in front of us.
Right. And you've got the skeptic in Richard, who's the head of the family that ends up helping them, and you really get to that whole audience point of view. Like, I don't know what's going on. The experts are over here, but now my family is in real danger, and I go from not believing what I'm seeing to I can't believe this is actually happening. Yeah.
And that happens a couple times. Like Rex is at first skeptical, and then Richard and his wife are skeptical, and the convincing keeps happening. Richelieu comes in and he recognizes things and he believes it. He's like, this is what's happening right now. And Mocata absolutely believes it.
Right. And Richelieu is almost like a Van Helsing character on steroids. He's been, and that's why I think this would have made a great series of movies. I would like to see the prequel and the further adventures, because I mean, Mocata is dealt with, but the devil most certainly is not. I mean, you can't kill the ultimate bad guy, really. Right. So that would have been, fun to see. But talking about magic, during that scene between Mocata and Marie in the parlor downstairs,
yes,
he talks about magic. He's like, it's not, all just like fancy spells and conjuring and stuff. It mostly is about will and willpower and and what you believe in and what you're willing to do for your beliefs. I'm like, that's again, to what you were saying, it makes everything seem so simple, but
Right.
even more terrifying, because it kind of gives you the idea that if you want to go far enough into the darkness, it'll you'll find it and be able to wield some pretty scary powers.
Well, and that scene between Mocata and Marie is stunning. It's such a, it's a great testament to both of those actors, because Charles Gray has so much power and charisma within his, his kind of weaving that spell. And Sarah Lawson, very subtly, you just see her kind of like it's almost like happening behind the eyes, where she's like, oh, oh dear, I'm losing control. I'm losing this battle. But it's not done in any kind of like weird or showy way. It's like, oh dear, I'm slowly losing my power. Another great example of that happens when Rex has kidnapped Tanith again, and they're in the barn together, and he has restrained her because, he knows that if I can keep Tanith out of the circle, then they can't perform the ritual. And Mocata kind of like inhabits Tanith's body and hypnotizes him through Tanith. And you watch Rex like go, oh no, oh no, and now I have to undo your bonds, and you get away, and I pass out. It's like, again, there's just these lovely, the performances are really what sell this one. And it's, like, Lee is obviously the star of the show, and with Charles Gray not far behind, but the supporting cast is just so strong, and you just buy right into all of it, and you have you genuinely care about all of the characters by the end.
Yeah, and I felt like I cared about the characters from the beginning, because they're
Mm-hmm.
so likable. And even the first time we meet Simon, as Richelieu and Rex figure out what's going on, you're like, oh, this kid's in trouble. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know it made me want to find out like how he got indoctrinated into all of this. Does he have, because he generally seems like he's been seduced by this cult,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily, it's not like someone phoned him up and said, hey, how would you feel about conjuring up the devil with us? Wouldn't that be awesome? But
Yeah.
no, but also talking about Simon, the actor Patrick Mower,
Mm.
there is a scene, and it's during that parlor scene that we talked about with Mocata and Marie, when Mocata looks up into the ceiling to take control of the people upstairs.
Mm.
Simon is in bed, and he's got this silver crucifix wrapped around his neck,
That's not
silver
that
cross.
scene. That's not that scene. That's actually earlier. But yes, he's under the power of Mocata. But that's the first time that they get him away, and they bring him
Oh,
home, and
okay.
then he escapes and
He's
goes back. But anyway,
right. Okay.
continue. But yes, yeah, that scene of him with the crucifix. Carry on.
Yeah, well, and thank you for correcting that. Again, I watched this in 2 days,
Yep.
and
Yep.
half a brain of sleep. But when he is in bed and he's got that cross, when he starts wrapping and wrapping that cross, the chain around his hands, we've seen this in other movies, of course. Usually that's the precursor to ripping it off.
Absolutely.
Like, I've got to get this thing off of me.
Yep.
But no, he's trying to strangle himself, because he's, under the influence of dark forces. And it's not until like, because the wrapping of the chain goes on for like, I feel like a solid minute.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, when is he going to yank it off already? And then you realize, oh,
No,
he's
he's
trying
just
to strangle himself to
yeah.
death.
Yeah, and of
Oh
course
my
the
gosh.
manservant, Richelieu's manservant sees him and takes it off of him, and of course that relieves him of the protection, and he escapes back to Mocata.
Yeah, and I love it, because when Richelieu finds out about this, he's like, I took it off him. I took it off him, sir. He's like, what? How could you do that? So he's really angry at the guy, but then he's like, I'm sorry. He's like, it's don't worry, it's not your fault.
Right,
So he's,
right.
he's a good guy,
Yeah, yeah,
in addition to being a good guy. Yeah, I love this movie. And as with so many of the, what I'm calling the off-brand Hammer films, which I'm going to stop using that phrase
yeah.
because it's way too dismissive of what I'm finding to be an entire back catalog of very rich, worthy of time and investment movies. because we started this talking about just Frankenstein and Dracula, and it is a great gateway
Yeah.
into all this. I don't think I would have appreciated Christopher Lee in this movie as much if I hadn't seen a dozen movies of him playing someone completely different.
Right.
I've been like, oh, this is a good part, but now it's just, it stands out as being stellar, and it makes me wish that, I mean, how many movies was he in where he played someone virtuous that you know of? I mean, I
Not
feeling
not
that it's very
many.
rare.
Yeah, I feel like, like he was cast to be the villainous Christopher Lee more often than not.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when Peter Cushing would play Dr. Frankenstein. You know,
Right.
that's I enjoy those parts almost as much like neck and neck with his Van Helsing stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
But is there anything else you want to go into regarding The Devil Rides Out?
They did two other Wheatley adaptations. One was To the Devil a Daughter, and then I'm actually gonna confirm this before I before I speak to it. But I know that Christopher Lee again was a huge fan. He would have liked to have seen much more of Wheatley's work being adapted. Oh, Lost Continent. That's okay. Yes. So Lost Continent was another Hammer film that they did. That also came out in 1968. So Wheatley had two adaptations in 68 for Hammer, and then To the Devil a Daughter, which is more or less recognized as kind of like the last gasp of Hammer. It was the last real horror effort that they had, and it features Christopher Lee, and it's Lee's not a huge fan of the film, and it's very kind of what you'd expect, the kind of cliches of, it doesn't have near the power and mysticism that this one does.
Well, I've got two final things I'd like to say. One is a note that I wrote down in what is essentially the first scene. It's when Richelieu and Rex go to the party. And I wrote down, you may be cool, but you'll never be Christopher Lee in a three-piece suit lighting a cigarillo with a tall red candle cool. He just walks by, sees his red candle, and like, I've got a cigarette in my mouth,
Yep.
and got to light it with something.
Yep.
And he just puts it back down and carries on about his business. So good. The other thing is, we didn't talk about how Mocata and his acolytes are vanquished at the end.
Right.
There's, fire and panic and everything, but just the eeriest scene when good wins, the room, the altar that this took place in is completely barren. There's no trace of any of the acolytes or the altar or anything, just this almost glowing white outline cross on the wall.
Yeah.
And then our triumphant hero is kind of like, hey, it's over.
Well, and that ending, I mean, how about that ending where you're like, wait, time just rewound itself, like this never happened. And that's fascinating to me. It's like, that's like, wait, what? Like it never happened? That's the kind of real magic where you have the ability to basically rewrite, the past 2 days. And it's pretty extraordinary.
It is. And again, it brought me back to Doctor Strange, because it is such a weird little way to end the movie. It's because I guess the biggest bonus is that Tanith, who had died during the altercation,
right,
and her spirit ended up speaking through Marie, which kind of helped them find where Mocata and his the rest of his gang were. It's like, well, we can't just kill Tanith. We got to bring her back. That would be lovely for saving the universe. It is a strange conceit, but I kept thinking about, this seems like such a Marvel problem. Like,
right, exactly.
What are the repercussions across the multiverse for never rewound time? But also, there was an incantation I thought was really lovely. Only those who love without desire may have power returned to them in the darkest hour.
Mm,
So it's the idea of and I think that's sort of, I guess, why this group was granted the cosmic gift of having their loved one back, because
mm,
Mocata is driven strictly by greed and power and wanting to have the ultimate control. He doesn't really love anything without condition, whereas these folks are, they love altruistically, almost for the sake of just good and protection of,
yeah.
the people that they care about. And it's a lovely message you don't expect to see in the middle of a Hammer horror film.
Right. Well, I mean, everything is done for the love of their brother. You know, it's like they go for Simon. They're saving Simon's. They're fighting for each other's souls, which is pretty great.
Yeah. Um, and so is this movie. So, what are we talking about next month? We're getting in. Are we in 1969 yet?
Gosh, what are we doing next week? I usually am on the spot on this one, but not today. But I'll have it for you in a second, folks.
All right. Well, while you're doing that, I'll vamp and say, we are getting into spooky season, which means I guess
Mm-hmm.
we'll just kind of I'll do a light teaser here. The Scare-a-Thons, the
Oh,
Friday night frights, as you like to call them, are coming back.
yes.
So I think the first one is going to be, let me look at my calendar down
Yeah.
here.
I mean, you kind of told me. I'm excited to hear what this roster is going to be.
Well, I don't have this pinned down exactly to what day we're talking about which movie, but I do know that 7:30 p.m. Central live on Friday, October 7th, we're going to be talking about something.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know some of the films that we've got on tap. In fact, I think all of them for Friday Night Frights. We're going to be talking about Poltergeist from 1982, The Lost Boys from 1987, Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn, also from 1987, and Bram Stoker's Dracula by way of Francis Ford Coppola from
Mm.
1992, which turns 30 this year. I feel so old.
Those are
But
some big anniversaries.
they are, and that's I couldn't talk you into Event Horizon, but it's weird. I can't seem to talk anybody into Event Horizon, so maybe that's all for the best. But no,
Old,
we're going to be trying to line up some special guests to talk about those movies with us, and yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And we're doing it. Do you have just give us a brief rundown of who we're benefiting this year? Because every year
yes.
we ask for to contribute as much as you can or would like to various charitable organizations. So who are we benefiting this year?
This year, we are the proceeds from our efforts will be going to the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. They are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that provides financial assistance for women who are unable to pay for safe legal abortions and emergency contraceptives. They also have an amazing network of partners, so that if women are in need of transportation or housing, they are able to provide assistance in that regard as well during these troubling times.
Yeah. Cool. Well, and we'll have all that information, up on both websites,
Yep.
Kicking the Seat and also Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and more information during the live streams coming up. So folks, mark your calendars starting October 7th, 2022. If you're watching this in the far future, sorry you missed it. We're going to be back with the Scare-a-Thons, and all month we're going to be doing a whole bunch of scary themed shows. I'm going to try and keep it strictly horror themed. All of my movie coverage, I'm going to see if I can pull this off.
Wow.
Yeah. And each show I'm going to try and get a plug in there for our Scare-a-Thon donations. So
Well, I will have a link. I will have a link for direct donation this year, so people can just go right to the link and they'll be able to donate right away. And also adding into your October cornucopia, we are going to be doing Twins of Evil from 1971. That will be our next Hammer offering. And once again, I realized we are doing the first and the third in a Hammer trilogy, as opposed to doing 1, 2, 3. So as we did with Quatermass, where we did the first one and the third one, here we're doing The Vampire Lovers and Twins of Evil, and we're skipping over Lust for a Vampire.
So is this an actual continuing story, or?
It is also a story of the Karnsteins.
Okay. Well, I'll have to go back and revisit The Vampire Lovers in preparation for Twins of Evil, I guess. Which,
Or not.
no complaints here. Well, all right. So, well, thank you, AC, Dr. AC of Horror 101 with Dr. AC. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, we'll catch you very, very soon.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. All right. Take care, man.